So, thank you for joining us for the seventh day of our session on the Bhagavad Gita. So, today we're going to begin the middle six chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. But before we do that, let's take a tour of the first six chapters and also look at the connection between chapter 6 and chapter 7. So, the entire first six chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is called Karma Yoga. These first six chapters of the Bhagavad Gita fundamentally establishes for us the Jivatma. It's all about getting to know who you are. Who you are means not on the material platform, but who you are spiritually, because eternally that is your identity, is that you are a spiritual being. And what do we need to know in order to achieve perfection is covered in the first six chapters. So chapter 1 begins with you suffering from amnesia. This you here is represented by Arjuna. Arjuna forgets his real identity. It's almost as if we have lost our minds, we've lost our consciousness, and because of that, we don't know who we are. We don't know what our job is. We don't know what qualifications are necessary for us to do this job. We don't understand if we do our eternal job, which is our only real job, what is the outcome for us? And how we've lost all sense of what's eternally right, what's eternally truthful. So to correct this disease of the Jivatma, of identifying itself with something that is not true, with something that is temporary, that is what the Lord actually focuses on the first six, in the first six chapters. So we said that the first chapter is Arjuna lamenting. His eyes fall upon his family members, relatives, loved ones, and that just sends him into bouts of compassion, anxiety, stress, distress. And how the Lord intervenes, but only after Arjuna asks for his intervention. So in the second chapter, the Lord intervenes by establishing for Arjuna what his true identity is, which is essentially what are the higher principles in life for us. Krishna begins by saying, if you simply observe matter, we should all come to the same conclusion that matter is impermanent. The only thing permanent is the soul, and the soul just goes on to occupy a new body. So that first principle of higher life is recognizing that we are not this body. We are eternally part and parcel of Krishna. Just like Krishna is Sachidananda, we are also Sachidananda. But because of our prolonged contact with Prakriti over many, many lifetimes, we have forgotten our true self. And so, to unpack this basic principle, the Lord talks about different frameworks that could be used to understand this basic principle in life, that we are all indeed spirit souls. So the second chapter is all about establishing our true identity. So once you know what your identity is, then the next logical thing is, now that I know who I really am, what's my duty? What's my real duty? Yes, I have duties on the bodily platform, but what is my duty on the spiritual platform? So you could say chapter 3, the single word summary is duty. Arjuna hears about his job description directly from Krishna. So one of the doubts that gets clarified for Arjuna in chapter 3 is that Krishna has said you are spirit soul in chapter 2. Now, Arjuna's argument is, well, if I'm spirit soul, why should I fight? If you're telling me I'm not this body, why should I waste my time fighting? If you're telling me this body is impermanent, the soul is permanent, why are you asking me to fight? Now that I know I'm the spirit soul, why can I not do everything on the basis of the spirit soul? And Krishna has to clarify this doubt in Arjuna. And in Shloka 9 of the 3rd chapter, the Lord, you could say, offers Arjuna a job to work for him directly and not anybody else. So Krishna says, anyway, all of us have to do some tapas, some austerities we have to practice just to survive. But why don't you do that tapas to please me? Therefore, why don't you work for me? That's the offer that Arjuna has received in chapter 3. So chapter 3's single word summary is duties. What are your duties and responsibilities both on the bodily platform as well as the spiritual part? Now that you know what your job description is, what is the qualification you need to perform your job perfectly well? To describe this qualification, in the 4th chapter, the Lord establishes what knowledge Arjuna needs in order to work for the Supreme Lord. And what's that knowledge that Arjuna needs? Which the Lord calls the Supreme Science. A knowledge of the soul, the super soul, and the relationship between the two. That the super soul is the master and the soul is the servant. How do you get this knowledge? Krishna says, approach a spiritual master. And they will transmit this knowledge to you, this knowledge about the soul, the super soul, and the relationship between them. So chapter 4 establishes the relationship between the soul and the super soul, and the position of the two, who is superior and who is the servant. So if we have forgotten ourselves and if we've forgotten our duty and we don't have the qualifications to perform our duties properly, because of our past conditioning, because of our forgetfulness of Krishna. That means we've also forgotten our qualifications. That is necessary. So you could say the first 4 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita are the basic ABCDs of spiritual life. And Krishna is transmitting that knowledge of this transcendental science directly to Arjuna in the process. So in chapter 5, well, now that you know what your duties and responsibilities are and what qualifications are necessary for you to work for Krishna very nicely, well, it has to answer the next question. What am I going to get by working for the Supreme Lord? This is a boss that I don't get to see physically. So Krishna says, after understanding this knowledge and working for me, the benefits of what all I have told you in chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, the result for you is peace. And that peace formula is in that last shloka in chapter 5. Bhoktaram yajnatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam jnatva mam shanti gacchati. So Krishna says, if you follow my instructions, you will attain this peace. So before Krishna starts speaking this knowledge, what is Arjuna's condition? Lamentation, complaining, contrasting. After he obtains this knowledge, a little bit more subdued. And he's beginning to understand his true position. So by putting all of this knowledge that the Lord is slowly revealing step by step, the result is going to be peace. So which brings us to the 6th chapter, which we covered yesterday. How can we sustain this peaceful existence, or this sense of having achieved this perfection in our spiritual practices? One way to do that is to meditate. So if you're constantly meditating on self and super self, super soul, you'll be able to sustain yourself, sustain the results that Krishna has promised you in chapter 5. So chapter 6 is essentially a heightened form of thinking that links us directly to the Supreme Lord through the process of Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. So Krishna talks about 2 different levels of yoga here. The yoga rurukshu, which is a neophyte, the neophyte who is primarily engaged in the first 5 angas, which is yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, and pratyahara. And Krishna talks about the advanced yogi, who is in the last 3 stages or angas, which is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And Krishna then says, your mind, it's either your friend or it's your enemy. If you learn to control it, it's your friend. If your mind is not under your control, it is your enemy. And in that context, the Lord talks about somebody who has reached that topmost stage of yoga rudha. What are the symptoms of such a person? which is that he sees God in everything and everything within God. Therefore, he sees friends and enemies all with an equal vision, similar to the shloka in the previous chapter 5.18. And then Krishna begins to describe the step-by-step process of how to begin to practice this meditation, which is you have to go to a secluded place. It has to be a sacred place. It has to be clean. You have to make an asana with kusha grass, deer skin, soft cloth, what your sitting posture should be, how your mind should be completely withdrawn, unagitated, devoid of fear, Krishna says. How such a person has to be practicing celibacy, and they begin to meditate on self and supersoul. Process of self-realization and God realization. And Krishna says such a person also regulates their habits. What kind of habits? Eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. 4 things that have to be regulated. So Krishna says not too much eating, not too little eating, not too much sleep, not too less sleep, like that. And the perfectional stage of Ashtanga Yoga is when your mind is completely under your control. It is steady. You begin to relish and rejoice in yourself. You are not impacted by dualities anymore that others may be experiencing in the world. And therefore, you achieve freedom from miseries due to contact with material nature. So what are the symptoms of someone who's reached this highest stage of samadhi? And how do they actually reach that stage? Krishna says such a person has determination, faith, and they do not deviate from the path. And step by step, they become situated in a trance. When the mind is fixed up on the self, and the Lord is saying, if the mind wanders, the yogi will bring the mind back under control. Just like a flame burning in a windowless place, the flame does not flicker. So in shlokas 27 and to 30, the Lord talks about 2 stages of realization. One is the Brahma Bhuta, and the other one is the Brahma Samsparsha. Brahma Bhuta is realizing that you are Atman, that you are a spirit soul. Brahma Samsparsha stage is realizing that super soul is also within you. And therefore, such a person sees the Supreme Lord, sees the Paramatma in everybody. That everybody's body is a temple within which is residing the Paramatma. And what does such a yogi do? He begins to worship the Paramatma. And after hearing all this, Arjuna asks, you're asking me to control the mind. I think it's easier for me to control the wind. Because mind, Arjuna protests. It's very stubborn. It doesn't listen to you. It's always wandering here and there, and one really cannot control one's mind. And Krishna responds by saying, yes, I understand it's difficult to control the mind, but it can be done through practice and by developing detachment to material things. So, abhyasena and vairagyena, through practice and through detachment. If you cannot control your mind, it becomes an obstacle on the path of of self-realization. So for a Dhyana yogi, mind control is very essential. And then Arjuna asks a very critical question, which is, all that is fine, but all the different yogas that you've talked about so far, Krishna, if I begin to walk down that path, but for whatever reason, if I don't achieve success in this life, what happens to all my efforts? Is that a waste of time? Is that a waste of energy? And you are saying I have to take birth again. If I take birth again, do I begin again from zero? So Arjuna's question is, what happens to this unsuccessful yogi? And in response to this question, Krishna gives two answers. The first answer is a yogi who has practiced any one of these transcendental paths for a very short period of time. And Krishna says such a person will be born either in a pious family or in a rich aristocratic family, which means the environment would be conducive materially and perhaps spiritually for the child to pick up where it left off in its prior life. But then the Lord also says, whatever little transcendental practices that you have had, such a yogi will first go to the heavenly planets, enjoy himself. Once the credits are exhausted, he will come back and then take birth in either of these two families, which is Suchinam Srimatam Gehe, a pious family or a very rich family. And then Krishna talks about that yogi who's practiced this for a very long time, including many lifetimes before. Krishna says such a person will take birth in a family of devotees. And Krishna ends that particular shloka by saying, however, such a birth is very, very rare. So what's the difference between being born in a pious family versus a rich family versus a devotee family? If you're born in a devotee family, then the chances of your simply picking up from where you left off and continuing down that path is very, very high, because both your parents are practicing Krishna consciousness, and therefore from the womb you are learning Krishna consciousness only, just like Prahlad. So Krishna says, after such a child revives his divine consciousness, as if without any logical reason or explanation, the child is naturally attracted to devotion. And he begins his sincere practice. And Krishna says, ultimately he achieves success. Success and perfection here mean, in this particular chapter, since we're talking about Dhyana Yoga, it's about self-realization and Paramatma realization. And in the last two shlokas, which is shlokas 46 and 47, the Lord compares a yogi who's practicing Dhyana Yoga versus a tapasvi versus a jnani versus a karma yogi. And the Lord clubs these four together and he says, out of these four, the one practicing Dhyana Yoga is the topmost, which is the Dhyana yogi is better than a tapasvi. A tapasvi is somebody who practices severe austerities. He's better than a jnani. He's better than a karma yogi. And in the last shloka, which sets the stage for the middle 6 chapters that we are going to discuss with that begins with chapter 7 today. The Lord says, but among all the yogis, that yogi who's always thinking of me and very lovingly offering his devotion to me, such a person is topmost. And Krishna says, that's in my opinion. So Krishna is saying of all the yogis, his devotees are the best. In the previous shloka, Krishna has compared 4 other different types of yogis. In the last shloka, Krishna said, in my opinion, the topmost yogi is the one who exhibits pure love for me. Therefore, out of love, they're always thinking of me and they're always trying to serve me. So that is the first 6 chapters. So now coming to the middle 6 chapters, which is called Bhakti Yoga. We said the first 6 chapters is about who you are, what's your real identity. The middle 6 chapters shifts away the focus from Jivatma to Paramatma. Chapter 6 is all about meditating on self and Paramatma. So carrying that theme forward into the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the focus now shifts to who is this Paramatma. So you could say in the middle 6 chapters, Arjuna is getting to know Krishna better. The technical details of where he is, who he is, what is his power, what is his opulence. So it's like a job interview. So Krishna has offered Arjuna a job in chapter 3. And now Arjuna gets to ask questions about what kind of a boss is he going to be working for. Now, before you accept a job offer, you want to know what kind of boss you have. Is he a micromanager? Is he going to give you freedom? Is he going to be a cranky boss? Is he going to be a vengeful boss? Is he a loving boss? What kind of boss is Arjuna going to be working for? Besides that, besides figuring out who's this boss that has asked you to work for him, and he said, great benefits you'll get if you work for me. You'll have peace. What about the rest of the package? How is Arjuna going to get paid? Are there any other benefits that he's going to get by working for Krishna? What are the terms and conditions that he has to adhere to? Is this boss a reasonable boss? Is this boss going to offer him an insurance policy? In other words, Arjuna begins to discover, is the package, overall compensation package, attractive enough for him to take this job offer that Krishna has given? So with that, we'll begin chapter 7. So chapter 7 is all about knowing who is this boss. So the first order of the day is to discover who's the boss. So let us see how Krishna describes himself now in chapter 7. So chapter 7, so if you look at the summary view, chapter 7 is titled Jnana, Vijnana, Yoga, which is knowledge of the absolute. Krishna is not just the boss, he's the absolute boss. And that's what Arjuna is going to discover in chapter 7. So before we begin, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the acronym for today is HEAD, H-E-A-D. And the whole chapter begins with Krishna saying, listen very carefully. I'm about to reveal some more confidential information to you. So it begins with Krishna saying, Hear carefully, Arjuna, because I'm about to speak some important information. How the Lord is present everywhere. He's the source of everything and He's the essence of everything. The Lord is going to give very few examples of how Arjuna can experience Him everywhere and in everything. And then Krishna talks about 4 different types of people who accept Him and worship Him, and 4 different types of people who reject Him. And then there is a section in this particular chapter where Krishna talks about why the worship of demigods should stop. That may come as a surprise to us in Vedic culture, where we are so used to worshipping many, many demigods. So in this chapter, Krishna will tell us why we should not. So let's look at how the chapter begins. It's a very nice chapter. It's a shorter chapter. So knowledge of the absolute. Absolute means here Paramatma, the Lord. So text 1 begins with, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. So Krishna is saying, listen very carefully. I'm going to reveal to you that knowledge which you have accepted as true, and that knowledge which is actually true. And Krishna says, not many people are striving to understand this knowledge. In the next shloka, Krishna is telling Arjuna, out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So he's saying, even the yogis who have achieved self-realization, not many of them actually know who I am. And now, the Lord is going to talk about 2 of his energies. Material energy and the Jivatma, which is his spiritual or superior energy. So Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all together, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. So Krishna is saying all of Prakriti comes from me. All the raw material energies come from me. They are my Shakti potency. And in the very next shloka, Krishna also claims ownership of you and me. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So this material inferior nature is shloka 4. So these jivatmas are acting on this inferior material nature and creating a whole new reality for themselves. A reality, unfortunately, based on illusion. And Krishna is saying all created beings have their source in these 2 natures, which means everything that you see around you, Arjuna, is a combination of matter and spirit, and how spirit is acting on matter. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. Krishna is saying everything originates in me and everything comes back into resting state in me. And when creation has to begin again, the whole cycle starts again. So the jivatmas that don't achieve liberation, at the time the entire material cosmos is wound up, those jivatmas who have not achieved moksha are in a resting state within the Supreme Lord. And when the process of creation begins, these jivatmas who still have karmic reactions simply take on whatever bodies they need to take on, and the journey continues from there. The Lord says, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Meaning, whatever we see all around us, including ourselves, all of it belongs to the Lord. But just like pearls are strung on a thread, but you cannot see the thread, but you know something is holding those pearls together. Similarly, we can only see all of the Lord's Shakti potency. We are unable to see the Supreme Lord who is behind that Shakti potency. Because the Lord is that thread holding these pearls together. And then the Lord gives examples of how we can always think of Him. How is He present in everything and He is the essence of everything. So, O son of Kunti, I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am the sound in ether and ability in man. I am the original fragrance of the earth, and I am the heat and fire. I am the life of all that lives, and I am the penances of all ascetics. O son of Pritha, know that I am the original seed of all existences, the intelligence of the intelligent, and the prowess of all powerful men. I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Bharatas. Know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So, in a very, very short set of shlokas, the Lord is telling Arjuna how he pervades everything. If somebody is intelligent, Krishna says that intelligence comes from me. If somebody is powerful, Krishna says that power comes from me. If somebody experiences the taste of water, especially when they are very, very thirsty, that taste of water, Krishna says, comes from me. If you smell the earth, especially when it rains in the springtime, that smell of the earth, Krishna says, comes from me. So Krishna is saying everything there is, life itself, he says, comes from me. So he's sustaining everything. You and I cannot breathe even for a single second without the Paramatma within us. So you see how the boss has spoken about himself. and establish for us why he is the boss, because without him, nothing will function. That's it. He takes care of everything. You don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty details of how everything functions so beautifully in this universe. But Krishna is saying, I am behind all of this. So one of the important things for us to remember is that we cannot get to know Krishna by seeing him. We can only get to know about Krishna by hearing about him and hearing from him. So hearing is a very important element, as we discussed, of the 9 limbs of bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So everything begins with hearing. So the more we hear about the Lord, the more it develops our faith in him. Therefore, Krishna begins this entire chapter by saying, here Tatchrinu, the word Tatchrinu means here. So the first shloka, again, this is a very famous shloka. Shri Bhagavan Maya Saktamanaf Partha Yogam Yunjanmadashrayah Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatha Gnasyasi Tatchrunu. So you have to hear first, so that your mind gets fixated on the Supreme Lord, so that your consciousness is directed towards the Supreme Lord. And through constant hearing, your mind will develop deep attachment to Krishna. And when your mind develops deep attachment to Krishna, Krishna says you will get to know him in full. And that will free you up from any other doubts that you may have. And therefore, your faith increases. We've covered this in the Secrets of Gita Review program, how there are 3 processes for acquiring knowledge. One is through direct perception, which is called Pratyaksha Pramana, which is seeing is believing. The second way in which we acquire knowledge is through the process of hypothesis and logic, which is called Anumana Pramana. So you could say this is through direct experience. And then Shabda Pramana, which is called deductive knowledge. So our Shastras say, if you read the Ishopanishad and the purports to the Ishopanishad by Srila Prabhupada explains how we can acquire knowledge through the ascending process or through the descending process. Descending process means all the knowledge that is based on the absolute truth is already there, and therefore it is simply handed over from generation to generation through the Guru Parampara system. Whereas in the ascending path, you have to do your own experiential learning, do your own hypothesis testing to understand what is the Supreme Absolute Truth. Which means if somebody tells you 2 + 2 is 4, you don't believe them. You will try and prove it for yourself before you believe it. And the Ishopanishad, in that particular purport for one of the shlokas, Srila Prabhupada writes how the ascending process of acquiring knowledge takes a lot of time. And it can be a very frustrating experience because you may not achieve success. Therefore, the easier way of acquiring knowledge is through the descending process or the deductive knowledge, where the knowledge has already been proven. You don't have to try and reprove it again and again and again. You just accept what the Guru Parampara system states to you as the absolute truth, because that knowledge has been revealed, as the Lord says in chapter 4, by himself. Therefore, there is no need to doubt the words of Krishna, because this is considered revealed knowledge, revealed scriptures. So just like how can you know who your father is? Well, one way of doing is to do a DNA test. Two is you can guess. The other ways in which you can surmise, or this could be my father, or that could be my father. But the easiest way to find out who your father is to ask your mother. So similarly, the easiest way to find out about the Supreme Lord is to ask Guru, bona fide Guru and sadhus in that parampara. So how can we know about Krishna? So if you want to know who's this boss, Krishna has given 4 or 5 examples in this chapter. But you want to know more, then you have to go back to the 4th chapter where the Lord said, accept a guru, surrender to him, do submissive inquiry, do service. In this way, there is an exchange of who is the Supreme Lord, why you should bow down to him, not by guesswork or speculation on your own. So therefore, the best way to acquire knowledge, spiritual knowledge, just as much as we acquire a lot of material knowledge by hearing from our parents, similarly, for spiritual knowledge, you have to hear from a bona fide guru. That's how you get to know more about Krishna. Krishna has said he is the source of matter, he is the source of spirit. He is the boss of Prakriti, he is the boss of Jiva. And that's why he's called Ishvara, controller. He controls everything. He's the essence of everything and he's the cause of everything. So, Shakti and Shaktiman. So, in this particular shloka, the reference number is incorrect. It's shloka 3, I believe. Bhuvirapo nalo vayuhu khammano buddhireva cha ahankaram iti yamve bhinna prakritirashtada 8. 8 separated energies arise from me. The 5 gross and the 3 subtle. The 5 gross is earth, water, air, fire, and ether. The 3 subtle energies that arises from Krishna is mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then the superior energy, which is Jiva, like you and me. Pareyam mitastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. So this superior energy, the Jivatma, is manipulating this raw material energy, both the gross and the subtle, to create a reality for themselves, separated from the Supreme Lord. And they get trapped in their own illusion. So Krishna has said he is the taste of water, he is the light of the sun, he is the sound of ether, he is the intelligence in the intelligent. As a matter of fact, any ability in man comes from Krishna. The unseen is proven by the seen. You cannot see the thread in this pearl necklace. But then by seeing the pearls, you can understand something is holding the pearls together, which is the thread. Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protam sutre manigana iva. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. The thread is not visible, but that does not mean that thread does not exist. It's there holding all the energy of the Lord together. Now we come to the section where the Lord talks about 4 kinds of people who surrender to him and 4 kinds of people who do not surrender to him. And of those who surrender to him, the Lord says the Jnani is better. And of those who surrender to him, the devotees are very, very rare. So Krishna is telling us, we come back to 13 and 14. Krishna has said in 13, deluded by the 3 modes, The whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So he's saying practically nobody knows me simply because they don't see me. They think I don't exist. And this divine energy of mine, which is Prakriti, consisting of the three modes of material nature, which is Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamun, is difficult to overcome. Remember, in the second chapter, the Lord has instructed Arjuna, I believe in the 45th shloka, that one must transcend the three gunas to be able to connect to him. Krishna is saying it's very difficult to transcend these three gunas, to get away from their influence. But Krishna is also giving the solution how you can transcend the three gunas. How? Simply by surrendering to him. Krishna says you can easily, sulabham, easily cross beyond it. This is the only shloka in the entire Bhagavad Gita where the Lord has used the word easy. Those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond the influence of the three gunas. In this shloka, the Lord talks about the four kinds of people who do not surrender to him. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. And in contrast, O best among the Bharatas, four kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. So, Krishna uses some harsh words to describe those who do not believe in him, who do not care for him, who do not bow down to him, even if they know about him. Moodha, meaning the grossly foolish. These are people who just work hard for a living. They are just busy chasing things and accumulating things. That's it. They don't have time for Krishna. The Naradhama, these are uncivilized people whom Krishna considers to be the lowest of mankind. They are completely under delusion. Mayaya apahrita jnana. These are the so-called intellectuals in society who propagate that there is no God, who propagate there is only science. They don't understand that even the science of God is actually a science. Ashuram bhavamashritaha. These are the demoniac people. So these are the four kinds of people Krishna says they will never surrender to me. They're too busy caught up with their own nonsense or their own delusions. And the four kinds of people who Krishna says surrender to him, those who are distressed. They're looking for anybody to help them and solve their problem, and some of them approach Krishna. Please intervene in my life. I'm having a difficult time. These are the distressed. Artha Arthi, those desirous of wealth. Wealth means any kind of prosperity. They're searching. I want more, I want more. And they think if I worship Krishna, he is the Supreme Lord, he should be able to give me whatever I want. If he is pleased with me, he will reward me. Jnana, those who are just curious. Okay, I heard Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Let me attend a few classes and figure out who he really is. Let me find out who this personality is that everybody claims to, that this person is God. And then the Jnani, the one who knows that Krishna is the Supreme Lord and he genuinely wants to know more about who the Supreme Lord is. So these are the four kinds of pious. So remember, Krishna is calling all four pious. And of these four, Krishna compares these four and says the Jnani is the best. In these four, he has not listed his Bhakta yet. So out of these four, the Jnani is the best. And then in the next shloka, a couple of shlokas later, Krishna says the Bhaktas are very rare, which means a pure devotee is very rare. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudhurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Remember, Krishna said, hardly anybody knows me. Even out of the thousands who have achieved perfection, not everybody knows who I am. So he is repeating that. He's saying, his pure devotees who practice pure love for Krishna. Krishna says, such a great soul. Sudhurlabha. Such a Mahatma is very, very rare. And we are so fortunate to live at a time when Srila Prabhupada walked on this earthly planet from 1896 to 1977. Prabhupada was here, a pure devotee who took the world by storm by taking the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra from India all the way to US, so much so that across the globe in almost every single country, this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is being chanted. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So such a rare soul, pure devotee. Krishna is saying, they are the topmost, they are the best, but they are very rare. They don't come frequently. And to the section of the Bhagavad Gita, which can be a little bit disconcerting for some of us when we hear these shlokas from Krishna. Krishna says demigod worship is done by those who are not very intelligent. Kamaistaistaihritaඥānāः prabhadyante devataः tam tam niyamamāsthāya prakritya niyatā svaya. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So Krishna is saying, when you have material desires, actually your intelligence is not very high. And because you're less intelligent, but you have so many desires, you decide, I will go worship the demigods. But the problem with worshipping the demigods is that whatever the results they give you is temporary. And if you get really attached to the demigod and you become a pious devotee of that demigod, Krishna says your destination is you will go live in that planet of that demigod. That means there's no chance of you going back to your original home when you're deeply attached to a demigod. Maximum, you will go to the planet of the demigod, which also is in this material universe. The demigods all live in this material universe. They don't live in the spiritual world. That's why it's called the heavenly planets, the Swarga Loka. So who can become a devotee? Yesham tvantagatam papam jnanam punyakarmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dhradavrataha. Krishna is saying, persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So, what is the Lord saying? He's contrasting those who worship the demigods with those who worship Him. And the number of jivatmas that worship Krishna are actually very, very rare. So let's come back to the chapter here. So here Krishna is talking about right after the 4 impious and 4 pious people. Krishna says, of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. All these devotees means those 4 pious people. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls. But he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal. So this is a reference to the Gyanis. The next shloka is a reference to the devotees. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. And then the section about the demigods. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. I am in everyone's heart as the supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. Krishna says, at least I'm seeing some indications of faith when somebody is approaching a demigod. So I will strengthen his faith in that demigod so that he at least is doing or attempting to come to that path of self-realization. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. Krishna is saying, all those who are worshipping demigods, they're doing it without realizing I'm the one who's sanctioning it. Remember, we saw in one of the earlier chapters the triangle. The Jivatma desires, the Supersoul sanctions, and Prakriti executes the orders of the Lord. So even when we worship the demigods, it is the Lord who is sanctioning your desire, because the demigods do not have the power to sanction those desires. The Lord has to sanction and then the demigods implement. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods and their fruits are limited and temporary. So whatever benedictions the demigods give you will last you only this life. After that, zero, back to zero again. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. So the difference between worshipping the demigods and the Supreme Lord. So hence Krishna is saying those who worship the demigods, their intelligence is not very high. Because whatever fruits that they get will last them only this life. Whereas when you worship Krishna, you carry the fruits forward into the next life in the form of spiritual credits, not in the form of karmic credits. Therefore, Krishna is saying, if you're really intelligent and you know how everything functions, you will only worship me. Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. So Krishna is also identifying that in the future, Some people will say, Krishna, just an ordinary personality with extraordinary talent and gifts. Or there are some who will say, God does not have a form. He's just this white light. It is just when he has come into this earthly planet, suddenly he takes on a form. And Krishna is saying, these people, they don't know my higher nature. They don't understand that I am supreme, I am imperishable. And Krishna says, I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I am covered by my internal potency. Internal potency here is Yogamaya, represented by Subhadra Devi. And therefore, they do not know that I am unborn and infirm. Krishna is saying, all those foolish people walking around saying there is no God, the God is like this or God is like that. Krishna says they can never see me. They can never realize me. Oh Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me, no one knows. Krishna is saying he knows everybody's past, present, and what's going to happen in the future. But none of the Jivatmas know him. O scion of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, which means all of us are born in Tamogun, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate, raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. Those in consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So in this last shloka of the 7th chapter, Krishna is establishing emphatically that he is the absolute boss. Why is he the boss? He uses 3 terms: Adi Bhuta, Adi Dhaiva, Adi Yajna. These 3 terms he uses in that last shloka. What is the meaning of Adi Bhuta? He says, everything belongs to me. I am the owner of everything. All the Jivatmas belong to me. Adi Dhaiva. All the demigods report to me. I am Adi Daiva. Adi Daiva here means ultimately he is the Ishvara. He controls everything. But he uses his agents to implement that control. But ultimately he is the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. And the final term that the Lord uses is he's Adi Yajna. Any sacrifice, any tapas, anything that we do, any austerity that we practice, the Lord says he is the final enjoyer, which means all sacrifices are directed towards the Yajna Purusha, and therefore he is Adi Bhuta, Adi Dhaiva, Adi Yajna. And this is how he establishes himself as the boss. I am the boss of all the bosses, and therefore, in this way, Krishna is establishing his supremacy to Arjuna in this particular chapter. So with that, we'll stop here for the day.